Now, with the advent of democracy in 1994, the country set about retelling its story and remembering the many people over centuries that helped create the new South Africa. One of the ways these heroes have been honoured is having streets named after them. Now, this was the beginning of a journey for author Khethiwe Zulu, who, in writing a book called South African History Retold. I spoke to her a little bit earlier on.
It was me navigating our cities nationally and seeing new names and didn't know the stories behind these people. And I went about compiling it at first just for myself. And then the more I read about them, the more I thought these are stories that needed to be told.
Wow.
And I didn't realize how many people were like me who were navigating cities and weren't quite sure of who these people that have been named after. So the inspiration was just literally that. I need to know, and after that, I need to share.
Yeah, because it's, a lot of people, especially young people, I would imagine, a lot of these historical figures they don't know, they haven't, but there are also many adults. I looked at some of the names in there, even I wasn't aware of them. Yes. And that's a sad thing, isn't it?
It is, and it's something that will get lost progressively over time if it's not documented correctly.
All right, so there are how many people that you've put in this book?
There's 136 names in the book. And like you're saying, there are snippets of the life of those people. So I didn't want it to read like a history book. It's a reference guide, it's a beginner's guide, and hopefully whets the appetite enough for people to want to research the individual names further on their own. But 136 books, names in the book.
All right, so I know that you were inspired particularly by streets in Durban, but a lot of these figures are national icons. Yeah. Let's take a look at some of the names that have made the book for you, starting with Chris Hani, it looks like.
Yeah, in the book, and the ones that I'm going to count really are for different reasons for me. Chris Hani, there's also Albertina Sisulu, those are the most familiar ones. There's the less familiar ones, Phila Ndwandwe and Rick Turner. And why they
so
come
Chris
up
Hani,
for me.
why is he in the book?
The ones especially that I've counted have one thread, and I guess it's because I became a mother and stuff started to become more sensitive. But they were, for example, Chris Hani was killed in front of his daughter. Albertina Sisulu couldn't even breastfeed her child while she was in prison. Phila Ndwandwe left a 2-month-old child to go and fight in the struggle. And Rick Turner, once again, shot through the window of his home, died in the hands of his daughter. So those, although they're in the book with many others with stories like that, those for me hit home because they were families. There were families involved.
So Albertina Sisulu, this is the other thing, I guess, a lot of people are known as wives of, and yet they had their own stories and their own contributions to make.
They had their own stories before, way before they met husbands. So a bit of a point when you always see them in reference to, and you've done research like this and found out that they were stand-alone giants in their own rights. But such is the way sometimes history is told.
All right, so Phila Ndwandwe, and there's an interesting picture for me that I saw online about this woman holding a child and a gun. So she was an MK, Kada. Tell us about why her story is important.
Especially that, when you see the selflessness of people in the book, particularly, like I'm saying, for me, mothers who didn't necessarily think that they were fighting for their generation, but were handing over a torch, and a better torch for the future generations, for their kids, and willing to die for theirs and ours. And for me, I don't think it's something I would be able to be brave enough to do, to leave my kid and go and fight for yours. So stories like that, they stick.
I must admit, I have to put my hand up. I didn't know Rick Turner, and he's quite a big street in Durban. Who was he?
was a person who was very vocal and also very close to Steve Biko. Also subscribed to the notion of black consciousness and started to want to change mindsets about how white people were viewing black people and their thinking and trying to get us white people into the minds of black people. And obviously with massive resistance, banned and so on and so on, and eventually killed. And because he was protected a lot by the University of Natal, KwaZulu-Natal now, the street that runs near the varsity is called
named after him.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got all of this on the desk as well because there's a board game that goes with the book. Tell us about the board game and why you put it together.
I thought it was so important for this to be known that I didn't mind which medium it's known through. So since children sometimes can't sustain reading, I thought let them play history.
Right.
And hence the board game came about. And it's questions and answers that are from the book, but you're playing history instead of reading it.
And I suppose it becomes more engaging, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And how do you play it?
You actually qualify to be in the game by being asked one of the general knowledge questions.
Now, the calls on the board of Cricket South Africa to resign are growing louder. The sponsor of, amongst others, the one-day cricket in South Africa, Momentum, has added its voice to the chorus. It's outlined very specific governance and reputational requirements that CSA has to deliver on in order to restore their confidence. One of the requirements is that the board, or alternatively the president and vice president, resign in order to address the leadership crisis at Cricket South Africa. Another is an independent forensic audit of the financial affairs of CSA. If these requirements aren't adhered to, Momentum will reconsider its sponsorships at the end of the season. All right, and that's where we're going to leave you today on SA Today. You've been watching Your Story this past hour. Join us again tomorrow at the same time from 3 o'clock Central Africa time. But coming up shortly is the Full View team. Have a good evening, everybody. Bye-bye.